Hi, and welcome. Dr. Keisha Ducree here, and I am currently teaching my Introduction to African American Studies course right now for the summer. It's a 6-week course. It's a crash course, survey course in the African diaspora. And the whole focus of it is the theme that runs through it is about African, specifically West African cultural retentions among the diaspora. So if you're watching from my class, hi. And if you're one of my subscribers or new to my channel, welcome. Again, I am Dr. Keisha Ducree, and I am the creator and COO of the Sojourners Academy, as well as a professor. And I am so excited, although a little bit late, because as a Black Studies professor, one of the greatest examples, the thing that has made my soul sing as a professor of African American Studies is, of course, the Ryan Coogler film Sinners. So I know I'm late. I don't get out very often, but Sinners, there's specifically a scene in Sinners that really makes my Black Studies professor heart sing. And I'm not going to be giving any spoilers because I want to focus on this specific scene. And that is a scene where they are in the juke joint and the the character sings. He's a blues singer and he's introducing to everyone how amazing he is for such a young talent. And it begins with him with the riff on his blues guitar in a very rhythmic sound familiar with blues, and then the scene expands into Black music and Black sound and African sound across genres. From, you see tribal dancing, you see mass, you see hip hop, you have hip hop beats that merge in. It's really an amazing song, amazing scene, because it really demonstrates in like what, 5 minutes, really the focus of what I do in this particular course, Introduction to African American Studies. And it shows how we Africans, African American, Afro descendant people are linked culturally with Africa, specifically West Africa, because particularly those African Americans who can trace African Americans or Africans in the New World, which would be the Americas, North America, Central America, South America. If we can trace our ancestors through the transatlantic slave trade, most of our ancestors through that brutal system of human trafficking came from West Africa. And this scene takes you from blues, which is the center, and then it immerses out into all the genres of music that we're familiar with today. And it can't be done any better in showing you how we are all descendants. But lest I take this moment, I want to break it down into 3 categories. Where are my notes? Where are my notes? Here we go. The center scene that makes this Black Studies professor heart sing is because of that music scene and the elements of, I called, cadence, costume, and dance. Those elements of cadence, costume, and dance are the elements that show that we are all descendants from Africa and that we are part of an African diaspora. And no matter where we landed, we still have the rhythm and the dance and the presentation of our African ancestors. It is beautiful. So let's talk about cadence. So later on in the in my class, whether I teach it in its long form or whether I teach it in the summer, we talk about Black cultural production and we focus on music. There is an ethnomusicologist by the name of Maltsby, Maultsby, and I'll link to her work in the description, who is really an expert and has a book on introduction of African American music. A couple of years ago, Professor Maltzby did a wonderful visual representation for the Lincoln Center in New York. It's not available now. I'll try to see if I can find it at least in the interwebs archives. But she did this amazing timeline and with different arches and arrows of Black music, showing how you have the elements of like folk music and sacred and gospel, and how these three things become work songs and folk songs, and they become the basis of rhythm and blues, become the basis of funk and disco and hip hop. Is amazing. And so she talks about, in one of her books, she talks about the blues sound and the wail. Literally the sound, if you think of an old BB King, that old blues artists would make their guitars a voice, as an instrument of their song, right? So the guitar was talking. If you listen to BB King or anyone like that, there's a wail, there's a sound of Lucille was his guitar, of Lucille singing either in harmony or in their own voice. So this idea is a uniquely kind of African diasporic origin. If you think of Western music, you think of old, you think of symphonies and harmonies, but you don't necessarily think of a conversation in the African diasporic, a conversation between the instrument, primarily the drum or even the guitar or banjo or some kind of stringed percussionist structure, of it having its own voice. And so that is the cadence of a performance with a voice of the singer and the voice of the instrument, which is essential in blues, which is essential in this scene as it opens up. And then it connects to all of the other diasporic elements that I'm not going to get into, but I can if you take my course, that the diasporic element. So the cadence is is African diasporic in origin. It opens up that scene and it connects to the other musical sounds in that scene. Second is, after cadence, is costume. So we can recognize the eras if we didn't play the music. And the music is important, the cadence is important. If we didn't play the music, we would still know that there were different periods, right, through costume. So we see the funk artists, right, and in their wear. We see the hip hop artists. We see, I don't want to get to the dance. We see the different um, visual presentations of the performers in that scene, right? Costume is very important. We saw just a few weeks ago, the Met Gala was talking about Black dandyism, how costume then becomes very important in presentation in great ways, and sometimes in not so great ways when we begin to talk about the politics of respectability, about being and looking a certain way, and black people trying to emulate others as a way to gain respect and to recognize their humanity. And from a civil rights perspective, that doesn't always work. But the idea of costume and the way we wear clothes and what clothes have meant in terms of our liberation and in protest and in emulating, are very, very important too. And again, that scene, if you take the sound away, if you take the cadence, you still have the costume, and to talk about how Black people present themselves and how Black people are really the curators of a level of cool that is adopted by people, non-Black people, all the time. We are the trendsetters when it comes to fashion, as we saw a little while ago at the Met Gala, and I can't wait to get to New York City next month to go see the exhibit in person. And last but not least is the dance. So, cadence, costume, and I couldn't rhyme, so it's just dance. And again, you can look at it you can look at that scene without the music. You can tell the eras. that you can tell that we're talking about different eras. The film is set in, I think, I want to say the 1930s, 1940s. The film is set in that era, but again, not only do you see the different outfits, but the music and the outfits and the dances also reflect the musical genre, and the musical genre being born in a different era, but that they all connect, right? They all connect to cadence through costume, and you can see the different dances. I can't. I'm not even gonna say I'll be able to find the TikTok video because there's so many out there. But there was one that I saw that picked up on the dance and the way that the dances are also connected in steps, in ways that harken back to older dances or even to African or tribal dances. So, okay, I'll try to find it, but they were pointing the TikToker would show a contemporary dance move, something with a lot of footwork, and then they would clip to a scene of a particular tribe doing a very similar footwork. And so they did it a couple of times. They did like the cakewalk and then this and they kept flashing back from popular dance moves that we see, and then those same or very similar dance moves out of an American context, of Africans or different time and space. And so I am not a dance scholar, but I do know some, and I might ask about that as well. But definitely there are dance moves, particular footwork, the particular rhythm and the cadence of the way dancers' body perform that are very similar across space about how we dance, and the dances that we make, and how even the popular Latin American dances are also very similar to African dance styles and African musical styles. And so these three things, I tell you, that scene, I am going to get a copy, and there probably won't be a class that I will not, there will not be an African American, intro African American studies class where I will not show this clip and really want to break it down. There are a number of great commentaries out there that have come up about centers. One of the things I would like to point you to, if you want to do a deep dive into centers beyond just that scene, is that there is a center syllabus. Shout out to Keisha Blaine and her other coordinators, because there is a syllabus, and I'll link that to the description as well. But that scene, I can't even tell you about the whole movie. The movie, of course, is great. And I can break down a lot of those elements too. But I wanted to just focus on this one from an introduction to African American studies perspective, that musical scene really embodies the idea that we are all connected, no matter what language we speak, no matter what shore we ended up at in the New World in the Americas, that we are all connected by the origin of the culture of Africa. And you know what? I can talk and I can lecture and I can have you read things, but I can also kind of present all of that and then give you this particular scene so that people can visualize just how connected we are. So I'm excited. Great job. And I'll see you later. Remember, you can like and or do it both. Like and subscribe to this video and stay tuned for more of examples of kind of Black cultural references and Black geographies. Take care.